Hello and welcome back to Green Money Momentum, where we talk about market movements, making money, and money momentum. I'm your host, Trevor, and we are here for Monday's daily talk of stock. As always, I appreciate you all for joining me today. Disclaimer out of the way, this is not financial advice, just financial entertainment. So I always recommend doing your own due diligence because the more you learn, the more you earn. With that being said, when we look at the heat map here on screen, we could see that we were full of green. We could see that technology was very green today. The financial sector was green. Communications were green, with Google leading the way up 4.5%. So a big day in Google. We also did see a big day in Tesla, jumping again, continuing the rally that started on Friday for Tesla. And so that is huge because Tesla has been under a lot of consolidation the last couple of months, but looks like it could finally be breaking out of that consolidation trend. And when we look at the major indexes, both of them sitting at all-time highs, both the S&P and the NASDAQ, we could see on the SPY that we are at 660, both having a very bullish spark up, and investors right now are feeling greedy. And that is because, as we know, the big event for the markets are happening on Wednesday, and that is going to be the big FOMC meeting. Right now, there is the expectation that we get a cut, and that cut is at 25 basis points. And so some are expecting a bigger cut. I have heard 50 and 75 floated, but I do believe that we will have 25, and I do believe that this is a positive for the markets because we are finally getting some certainty with the markets and with the rate cuts. So all year, it has been very frustrating with the Federal Reserve continuing to pause at every single meeting, but they have basically put themselves in a corner at this point, saying that they will cut. And so the only thing that could shift this at this point and them not cutting is if some late news data comes out or something shocks the markets and Jerome Powell decides not to cut, or if Jerome does have Trump derangement syndrome or is tired of being picked on by the president, because once again he went on Truth Social and said too late, must cut interest rates now and bigger than he has had in mind. Housing will soar. So as we know, the Federal Reserve has been under a lot of pressure by the president throughout this entire year, but the Federal Reserve is strong. So I do believe that the Fed will still stick to their plan, which is to try to quantitative ease, if that's the right way to say it, try to implement quantitative easing kind of slowly, start with 25 basis points and go from there. But again, I think that is a positive because with this meeting and with this cut, we will also get a press conference with Jerome Powell, and we will get some guidance for the future. And I do believe that guidance will be more quantitative easing. So I do believe that we are going into a bigger cycle when it comes to QE. We also did see the president come out with a bullish sentiment around trade. As he said, the big trade meeting in Europe between the USA and China has gone very well. It will be concluding shortly. A deal was also reached on a certain company that young people in our country very much wanted to save. They will be very happy. I will be speaking to President Xi on Friday. The relationship remains a very strong one. This is positive if Trump is saying the right things here, because all throughout the year, there's been a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt around tariffs, interest rates, and then inflation. Right now, we are seeing bullish sentiment around interest rates. And if a trade gets met with China, this will be massive because this has been one of the biggest parts of the market this entire year, the news with China, the US, and what the trade deal will come out to be. The president also did write today on Truth Social that subject to SEC approval, companies and corporations should no longer be forced to report on a quarterly basis, but rather to report on a 6-month basis. This will save money and allow managers to focus on properly running their companies. Did you ever hear that statement that China has a 50 to 100 year view on management of a company, whereas we run our companies on a quarterly basis? not good. Myself, I would not be happy if this approval does go through with the Security and Exchange Commission, because I personally love the quarterly reporting, and I believe this makes the markets for the United States even more exciting, because with each quarterly report, we see what the results are for that company, and then we get guidance also. And so I love having the earnings reports come out, because each one gives you indications of what the company you are invested into is doing and what their results have been for the last quarter. Now, in general, though, the big news again is going to be on what the Federal Reserve does on Wednesday. And with that being said, I do believe that this will be a bullish spark for the markets. And historically, when the Fed does cut rates, this is best for risk assets. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today, a whole bunch of risk assets. We're going to be starting out with BMNR, Bitmine Immersion Technologies. And this company right now, a very volatile, risky asset, but provides a ton of potential. So if we're just talking about asymmetrical return on investment, something as investors we are always looking for, getting the most bang out of our buck, I do believe that BMNR does provide that opportunity, because currently we are well under the 52-week high, which was set when this company did have their initial public offering. And we have started to see some momentum gain within BMNR. And this company today added to their strategy of raising more money to add into Ethereum. So just as this reads right here, Bitmine Immersion said its treasury now holds more than 2.6 million Ethereum tokens with an average price of 4,300 a piece, and some Bitcoin on their balance sheet also. And so Bitmine Immersion is doing the exact same strategy as what MicroStrategy is doing, which is holding crypto on their balance sheet. Instead of doing it with Bitcoin, they are doing it with Ethereum. So if you are bullish on Ethereum, which I am, this is a great company to be involved in, basically a leveraged Ethereum asset. And just when we talk about technical analysis, we could be seeing a break here very soon, crossing over the 50-day moving average. On Friday, we are starting to ride up a little bit higher on the relative strength index. And then on the MACD, it does appear that we could be seeing a bullish cross there. And again, with the Federal Reserve cutting interest rates, this is going to be massive for all risk assets and cryptocurrency, especially if the guidance from the Federal Reserve is positive and they do confirm that we are going into a much larger quantitative easing cycle. When the Fed funds is low, this is historically when the markets are high. And so when the Federal Reserve does cut, this should wake up all risk assets. And if Ethereum pumps hard, well, you better bet that BMNR is going to pump with it. But I do want to give some caution to investors. When the Fed does cut on Wednesday, although everything is looking bullish, we could always see a bit of a drop off the start when it comes out, especially if they don't come out with clear evidence that we are going into that bigger quantitative easing cycle. We definitely are, but with the Fed, sometimes they like to mince their words. So if there is a drop off in the short term, well, that is fine. I will just take the opportunity to pick up more BMNR, because the markets will eventually continue to rip up. But just have that in the back of your mind going into Wednesday. Just make sure that your portfolio is properly managed, because as professional portfolio managers, what we are doing is we are professional risk takers. We are professional speculators to say, but we are also risk managers. And that is arguably the more important side of things. So with all the assets I am talking about today, I do have positions in all of them, but I am not betting the whole farm on each one. I do think it is a good idea to always be properly diversified as well, because the markets are a marathon and go on forever, and we are always just trying to improve our trading. But if we get too hyper bullish about one event and then chop off our legs, well, then we can't participate in these great markets anymore. But with BMNR, BMNR, again, even if there is a bit of a drop in the entire market, say we get some bearish news around the Federal Reserve, this company I believe in so much, I would be willing to wait through that pain because I do know eventually we will return back to the levels that we are at and go even higher. So myself, I am very bullish on BMNR. I think that all these crypto mining plays and all these crypto reserve plays are undervalued right now, which is going to bring us into our next stock, which I am very, very bullish on. And I do believe that we are about to bounce off the lows that we have been seeing, and that is in MicroStrategy. So just like Bitmine Immersion does their crypto reserves with Ethereum, I'm sure most of you already know, Michael Saylor with MicroStrategy does this with Bitcoin. And right now, when we look at MicroStrategy just on a technical analysis, we could see that in the most recent term, we have dropped under the 200-day moving average. We are fairly low on the relative strength index. And then it does appear that we could be seeing a bullish cross on the MACD here very soon. So just talking about risk management, I am very comfortable in my position in MSTR right now because of where all the technicals are lining up. And I see a lot of investors talking about MSTR online, a lot of investors frustrated that we haven't been seeing movement towards the upside, but I take all of that information and I see it as a positive because with Wednesday being a volatile date within the markets, I would rather be in a play that is a little beat down at the moment, but does show a lot of potential for recovery, which MSTR definitely does. This is the blue chip company when it comes to the crypto reserves. This company right here has the largest Bitcoin holdings in the world, and Michael Saylor's strategy has influenced all these other companies to do the exact same thing. And so what does that tell you? You know, Michael Saylor has really innovated the game when it comes to finance, you know, switching from US dollars to cryptocurrency on his balance sheet, a much better trade-off. Again, this could be the most powerful strategy in the world. The reason why so many other companies are following behind this strategy. And with Michael Saylor's company, with MSTR, there is a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt about dilution, but we did see that they paused their at-the-money offerings for the first time since revisiting guidance. So at their last earnings report, there was some fear, uncertainty, and doubt around this, but at their most recent chance to buy more Bitcoin, they actually held off on this time. So Michael Saylor is practicing his risk management right now going into Wednesday's meeting with the Federal Reserve. But overall, this company, again, has a massive amount of Bitcoin on their balance sheet, terribly undervalued at the moment when we look at all the technical analysis. And something else to think about when it comes to MicroStrategy is this company also did report their biggest earnings ever. That's funny. I typed in earnings there on the search bar, but MicroStrategy, look at this, their largest earnings ever when it comes to actual EPS. This was able to be done because they were finally able to report their Bitcoin earnings, their Bitcoin holdings as earnings on their balance sheet. And so we've had this massive jump up when it comes to their EPS, and it should continue. Now, all investors aren't happy with that. You know, they recently were snubbed out of the S&P 500. So what they are doing right now is pretty different when we talk about traditional finance. Some may see this and not like this, but we need to accept that this is the new strategy of what strategy is. Some still look at this company for the technology they offer, the software side, which they do have some business in that, but they are mainly a leveraged Bitcoin asset with a little bit of a company behind it, which did also see positive growth this last year. So very excited for what is to come in MicroStrategy. And again, this is the blue chip company around having crypto reserves. So many other companies are following alongside what Michael Saylor is doing. And so this could actually spark the entire sector of all these companies that are within reserves when MicroStrategy does have another pop up, which I do believe it will, just because when we're talking about everything we are at on technical analysis, low on all those indicators, which now brings us into our next stock, which is also very low on all the indicators for technical analysis. That is DJT. Oh man, you can see some of the drawings I made there. Oh, that is so funny. There's the king right there. Oh, that is funny. Yeah, I like to do these little drawings sometimes just for the heck of it. You know, it's kind of like paint, playing with paint for adults. So it's a lot of fun. But with DJT, we have been kicked down on this stock for a long time. I know on this channel, I have a lot of devoted DJT investors. And for all of us who have held through, I know it has been a rough time, but there is still a lot of opportunity within DJT. And what I would stress with this company more than anything is it is truly so much more than just a truth social platform, but really a true crypto fintech brand. And DJT as a company is really only starting. When we look at the history of DJT, we can see that their first earnings report goes back to just the first quarter for 2024. And what is really significant with this is Trump Media and Technology Group, a relatively new company. A lot of investors will look at the past on this company and say it doesn't have a lot of value because of the low sales, because of the weak earnings per share. But what we really need to know is, again, this company is relatively new and they have made most of their big business deals and really have formed as a company since President Trump has got into office. So DJT, the stock, is following what DJT, the president, is doing, which is being bullish on cryptocurrency and bringing us into the mass adoption into cryptocurrency. So we have seen the president this year officially add Bitcoin to the balance sheet on the White House, keeping it as a reserve token for the government, Bitcoin with some other assets. And we have seen DJT, the stock, do the exact same thing. This company recently purchased over $2 billion worth of Bitcoin. We have also seen some big deals with crypto.com, and also DJT is going to release a lot of big crypto ETFs. And so this company right here, a lot more than just a true social platform, really a true fintech company. And the craziness is really only getting started because we are really pushing in to the mass adoption into cryptocurrency. And with the Federal Reserve cutting rates on Wednesday, this is going to help the overall crypto market, and we should see Bitcoin jump a lot higher. So with DJT, they are doing the same strategy of what Michael Saylor is doing and what the White House and the government are also doing. When we look at this stock, we are pretty undervalued, right under the 50-day moving average, well under the 200-day moving average. We are right about in the middle of the relative strength index, but still very low on the MACD. So the technicals are all looking pretty positive, but I do want to warn investors, we did get a little bit of bearish sentiment in DJT recently because we did see the general counsel sold every share he could, becoming the second insider to cut the stake. And so the first insider that has cut the stake is Eric Swider. This is no surprise to me. This actually goes all the way back to when this company first formed. We were covering this in 2024 because Eric Swider, even though he is an insider with DJT and this other fella, they haven't been the best for the actual share price because they have sold a lot of their shares along the way. In the early part of the SPAC that came with DJT, when it first started out as Digital World Acquisition Company, Eric Swider did feel that he didn't get his fair side of the deal with DJT, and so he has been selling shares throughout the entire year. And so Scott Gabe only sold 30 shares worth of $500,000. Now, he still does have shares, but they are restricted, so he can't sell them currently. 339,000 shares at some point in the future. We also know that President Trump did hold a big portion of DJT stock. Now, as the president, he can't directly hold the stock, but he did put it into a trust fund and gave it to the Trump family, to his son, Eric. And so even though we did have a bit of a sale from Scott Glabe, I said Scott Gabe earlier, Scott Glabe, even though we did have a sale from Scott Glabe, there are still a lot of big politicians holding on to DJT, and we did see institutional ownership increase this last quarter too. So a lot of big firms hopping into DJT. Right now, the stock looking very undervalued, and just like we saw Michael Saylor and his big earnings pop recently by adding Bitcoin to their balance sheet, I see the same thing happening for DJT. I think all the financial instruments that they are adding, all these big ETFs, their big deal with crypto.com, and then their big Bitcoin reserve, this will all show up positive on their earnings reports in the future. And I think sometime when we have another earnings report, it is going to shock investors how quickly this company grows, because again, we are really jumping into the mass adoption into cryptocurrency, and DJT has positioned themselves very well for this, just like the other companies have also positioned themselves very well by having big strategic reserves. But what's important with DJT, again, this is a true fintech brand around cryptocurrencies. The ETFs are going to be huge for DJT. So those are all my crypto risk assets to talk about today. Now we're going to get into quantum computing, D-Wave Quantum. We have seen a nice bounce in D-Wave. As we have talked about many times with D-Wave, we are on a pretty predictable pattern on this stock. We at the early part of the year were in these levels with a rising level of support and resistance. Earlier in the year, we had a very positive quarterly earnings, which did boost us past that level of resistance. And since that spot, that level of resistance has been acting as a level of support. We did have a nice pop up in QBTS, and we are jumping above that level of support, but riding just at it. We now have gone a little bit higher on the relative strength index and on the MACD as well. But quantum, one of my favorite sectors to cover and one of the most volatile sectors within the market. So even though we are jumping a little bit on the relative strength index and on the MACD, this is a perfect example of a risk asset, right? With QBTS, this company in the early part of the year, at the end of last year, was valued under $1 and now has shot up all the way to $18.24. So a lot of investors have hopped into QBTS. We have also seen a lot of big institutional ownership grow in quantum computing. And when we just talk about technologies that could really shape the future, well, quantum is right up there with the best of them. And QBTS is my favorite quantum computing stock because this company is already working with a ton of other big corporations. They have greatly increased their customer acquisition this last year. And then I thought I would bring up this article because I thought this was interesting. And this is talks around a stock split with D-Wave Quantum. And so a possible stock split coming up in the future. If you don't understand what a stock split is, well, they could sometimes be useful, as this is going to read right here, but this is just where they split up their stock. So one share could become 2 shares, 50 shares, whatever the amount the company wants to split it to. So just as this reads right here, this could be useful for companies that have seen their stock increase significantly. If the per share price has risen into the hundreds or thousands, management may want to bring the stock price down to be more in line with peers so it feels more attainable for investors. Stock splits can also boost liquidity, which would definitely happen for D-Wave Quantum, but I don't think that we are just there yet. I don't believe that D-Wave Quantum needs to see a stock split right now, because even if we saw a 3-to-1, that would mean QBTS would be at a share price of $6. And if we were to see a 50-to-1, we would see D-Wave Quantum go back to being worth less than $1. So I don't believe that we are in that position yet. I still believe that we still have a lot of room to grow with what the current share price is at $18. We have recently seen $20, and I don't believe that this is too expensive for investors. So before we see a stock split in QBTS, I would like to see the price closer to around $50, which I know right now at $18.22 sounds like a long way away, but with the rips that we have seen within D-Wave, again, the entire quantum sector is very volatile, a very risky sector. When we see momentum in this sector could see the greatest gains within the market. We have seen all the quantum stocks this year have massive return on investment, true asymmetrical return. It has been beautiful seeing the returns in quantum. Truly one of my favorite sectors. If you're around me in real life, you'll know that all I talk about is quantum computers. So I'm very excited for the future in D-Wave Quantum. I do hold long-term positions in D-Wave, and I also do hold some short-term positions in D-Wave also. But I would be curious to hear what everyone else thinks in the comment section below. So please drop a comment. Let me know if you are invested into Quantum or if you are invested into any of the crypto assets that we talked about today. With the Federal Reserve cutting very soon, I think that this is going to be very positive for the markets, especially over the long term with the bigger quantitative easing cycle that we are going into. Over the short term, I am still being a bit cautious. I am basically bullish, but with caution. So I am not over leveraging myself, and I know that anything is possible, including a drop right when we see those cuts. But that is just short-term mentality. Over the long term, the markets continue to rip up, and that is the goal as portfolio managers, to be professional risk takers, but also be professional when it comes to the risk management. So thank you guys as always. Please drop that comment, please leave a like, and please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. I appreciate you all as always, and I will see you in the next daily talk of stock.